Welcome to Messy Parenting. This is Mike Hernon.
And I'm Alicia Hernon.
And this is a Catholic conversation on marriage and family. Although we're not experts, we're just trying to share some insights from the ups and downs of our marriage for the last 22 some odd years. And we have 10 children, and have a lot of fun here actually doing this podcast.
Yeah. It's tough over the summer, of course, because we have a lot of things going on. A lot of people going in different directions. My sister moved into town, and my son's girlfriend, who's an upperclassman in college, is here for the summer. So our house is usually very full of people.
That's right.
Well, my sister moved here with her 3 little kids. So, we have little kids, but
she
has really little kids.
That's right. Well, when you look at it and say our youngest is a 4-year-old, for many people that's like, oh, no big. That's like you still have little kids,
right? But for us, it's like, hey, she's big. She's 4-year-old. She's a big kid.
And we added chickens to our life this past summer too, which is very interesting.
And that's another reason why it's kind of eaten up some of our time. We've had coyotes eat them. And,
it was Wile E. Coyote came. Acme products do not work as they look like in the cartoons to keep Wile E. Coyote away. But
there was no dynamite involved in the stealing of our chickens.
Nope. Very, very. It shattered a lot of my preconceived notions about coyotes.
Everything you learned on Looney Tunes growing up.
That's right.
All your formation.
It was a sham. I didn't realize it. It was all a sham. All right, so we're wasting a lot of time here.
This has nothing to do with our podcast.
All right, so let's move on.
Except our big excuse of why we haven't been podcasting as much.
Yeah.
But we'll get back into a regular routine in the fall. I know we will.
Yes. So let's begin with a prayer. Okay. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Holy Spirit, come and be with us. Come into our hearts, our minds, and our marriages. Help renew us from deep within. In the darkest places of our lives, shine your light and refresh, renew, and reconcile us to Christ, to the church, to each other, Lord. And we ask all of this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
So the topic we wanted to talk about today, I believe is really crucial for marriage, is...
and actually it's crucial, I think, for relationships in general.
It is.
But especially for marriage.
So like a lot of things that we've talked about before, there are applications for this in any relationship.
Right.
But it's obviously at its kind of peak and summit in marriage. And this is one of those things that's essential in a marriage. And I think it's a challenge for a lot of people, but vulnerability, for some people, it's even just saying the word vulnerability.
It's the Long Island in you coming out.
I don't know, but then you say it and you try to spell it and you're like, vulnerability.
Think of a synonym for vulnerability.
So intimacy, maybe?
There you go.
I don't know.
Sure.
But first, when you think about it, there's a lot of reasons why people don't want to be vulnerable with one another. Because there's risk involved. There's fear of rejection.
Well, you know what? Before, you didn't actually put this down here, but you want to define vulnerability? Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah,
when you say that? So I would say vulnerability is expressing your true thoughts and feelings, and also in a way that is it's the best way I can think of it, and this is going to sound odd, but it's like being naked.
Well, I was going to say transparent.
Yeah. Okay.
But there is, and this also, you going with your thought, Patrick Lencioni has a book called Let's Get Naked, and there's something like that, or Get Naked. But it's about trust, and it's about sharing and having that deeper level of communication that isn't based upon fear, isn't based upon protecting oneself, and all of that.
And it's also not based upon. It's not based upon attacking or being aggressive.
Right.
So when I say share how you really feel, not like share how you really feel. You know? No, what I mean is like being honest about your hurts and your needs and your wants and your desires.
Right.
And expressing them in a way that's not aggressive or attacking, but just being honest.
Right. And there's a quote from St. Francis about humility, but it's you are, or be who you are before God and nothing more and nothing less.
Right.
And I've kind of paraphrasing slightly, but in a sense, that's what it's being. It's being transparent. It's being almost in the garden, naked without shame. And again, we're not talking about sexual intimacy, physical intimacy here. We're talking about
we're just talking about
sharing your
emotionally,
heart, sharing your life, sharing all that's about you. Does that make sense? Right? I think we covered the definition. So again, there is a lot of reasons why we hold back from that kind of sharing, that kind of intimacy, that kind of vulnerability.
And this is why we're talking about in the context of marriage, because sometimes it is right to hold back. You do not, and I know you're going to talk about that later, but we're not talking about being vulnerable with anyone.
That's right.
We're talking about, what holds us back from being vulnerable within our marriage?
That's right.
Specifically, that's what we're talking about right now.
Right. So if you look again, what holds us back? Risk, because it is a risk. I mean, the reality is when you step out, you're trying to love somebody. You're trying to share something. There's a risk involved. There's a fear of rejection. There's a potential shame with some of the things that you might be sharing.
Why would you say that there's shame? Like shame because...
We'll go into that a little bit more, I think, if that's all right. Can I hold your thought? But then the idea that there's also wounds and weaknesses, our past experiences. But ultimately, I think the reason why we may not share is that we doubt the other person's love for us. We doubt that it will be received and respected. And I think that really holds us back because we build these walls to protect ourselves. It's this facade or facade, however you like to pronounce that. But this facade that we make it look like, we got it all together and we're perfect or whatever. And that really holds us back and it keeps people at an arm's length.
One thing I remember thinking when we were first married is that I actually think, as hard as it is to say after you've been in a fight with your husband, as hard as it is to say, I'm sorry.
That's right.
I think it's actually harder to say, I was really hurt when you did this.
Yeah.
I mean, for me anyway. I think
totally
that it was...
Totally for me, particularly in the beginning. Now I can, say it all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But it's true.
But I think it's actually much harder to say...
Because you're admitting you're weak.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like, and especially when you're not in a fight, when your spouse doesn't even realize what they did or is just being thoughtless.
That's right.
Or at the beginning of your marriage, you really don't know each other that well. I mean, in those first 5 years, you're really just figuring things out. And then, you go on and you figure things out some more on a deeper level.
Yes.
But those first beginnings, like your spouse may not even realize what they did. And so you may feel bad bringing it up, But
you don't want to hurt them, you don't want to manipulate them, all those other reasons why you don't want to bring it up. In addition to
not wanting to be vulnerable
right.
and to be weak and be like, what, it's like, I wish that this didn't hurt me when you said this or did this. But you know what? It did. It did, and it's okay to say that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we, especially as Catholics and as Christians, we want to be like, well, it's just my sinfulness that I was hurt by that. Well,
that could
maybe.
be true.
I'm sure that could be true. But it's not, it doesn't invalidate your feelings.
That's right.
And your spouse needs to know that because there's dangers, which we're going to talk about, there's dangers to not addressing those things and just stuffing them.
That's right. And so if we're saying, here are all the challenges, here are all the obstacles, why do we want to be vulnerable at all? Like, what's the point here? Sounds like a lot of negatives, a lot of issues, and some of them are right reasons to not be that intimate with somebody. So when you think about it, though, but not being vulnerable, let's just on the kind of negative side. What if you're not vulnerable? It keeps you from being truly loved. Again, you kind of build that wall and you're keeping people at a distance. It doesn't allow people in to really love you.
Well, I think you need to be specific here, and keep talking about marriage. Because like when you say that like, well, sometimes those reasons are right. Well, sometimes those reasons are right to not let people in if you're not married to them.
Well, I know, but you see, the reality is that I think when you have vulnerability, again, we're talking about it's essential in marriage, but really you should be vulnerable with probably a very small group of people.
Right.
But it could be just good friends or sister.
People who have earned your trust.
Yeah. And it's we'll kind of talk through how to kind of work with that. But if you have a wall, if you have complete, what's the opposite of vulnerability?
Invulnerability.
Yeah, what is that? So it's impenetrable. You've created a wall that you won't let anyone in. So we're sharing a little bit of ourselves. We're being a little bit genuine, a little bit with lots of people, and then you have circles of trust. To go with the who's the guy from Meet the Parents? What did Rob De Niro's character? Anyway, but there are circles of trust, and as you get closer and closer, you're sharing more intimacy and sharing more vulnerability. And at the center is you and your spouse. As you let people in, you're letting yourself be loved, but there is risk involved. But there's so much joy. There's so much power in that. But if you aren't vulnerable, you also close yourself off from real growth. And that real intimate communication, that we communion, if you will, that we long for. Because
if you don't let anyone if you don't reveal yourself, then people can't really know you.
That's right.
And I remember hearing once that when you were falling in love with someone, like everyone has a mystery inside of them that no one will fully know except for God.
There you go.
And I know that. Like I know that there's deepest parts of me that no one except the Lord can really know. But when you fall in love with someone, you kind of get a glimpse of that, and you want to spend your whole life finding that and getting to know that person, to kind of get into that deepest part of them. And if you are in a relationship with someone who's not revealing themselves or doesn't want to reveal themselves, you really can't know them, because you can't force your way in someone's heart. Right. We each have to open up those gates of our heart to allow other people in. And so that growth in relationship can really only happen if you open up and you share.
That's right. And I don't think I am being exaggerated or flippant in this, but without vulnerability, you are setting your marriage on a course for destruction. Because if you aren't taking that risk, if you aren't stepping out, I really believe you're dooming your marriage. Yeah. And you're setting on a course that you're gonna have a crippled, broken, or
it's kind of like if you're not growing, you're dying.
Right.
If you're not growing in love and relationship with your spouse by getting to know them a little bit better every day,
and
every
them getting
week,
to know you,
right, every month, then it's going the opposite way. There's no standing still.
Right.
But
again, if you do open up, if you do allow yourself, you do allow your spouse in, and if you are willing to go deeper with them and share, you'll be more who you truly are. You'll kind of have this sense of deeper acceptance that you probably never had before.
Well, I think why that happens is because when you reveal yourself to someone,
that's right.
And maybe it's something that is hard for you to say, or hard for you to, I've never told anybody this before or whatever. But when you say that and that is received with acceptance and love, like, I'm so sorry, and like when that's really received, then that makes you revealed who you were and it was validated. And so you're like, oh, that kind of validates me.
Yes.
As a person. And so
Amen.
then you reveal more. And that can be validated, and then you get stronger and stronger and stronger. And I really think, I know I have changed so much in 25 years of our marriage. For better and for worse.
No.
For craziness, for better and for crazy. A lot more crazy things. But that's the point of your vocation. I certainly hope that I have changed in 20 years. I would hope that for any person.
Yeah.
But I think that part of that growth in my confidence, certainly in my confidence in who I am and whatever comes from having revealed myself to you and having been affirmed in that, and our relationship is stronger, and there's such a deep trust.
Yeah.
Now, like I really feel
it's really powerful when you get right down to it.
Is. And it was hard, super
it's not
hard.
Easy. Yeah, but because we're sinful creatures, right? And we lack the trust that we have. I lacked the confidence that you would love me that much. That, and I wouldn't have ever said this, but it's almost as if I was saying, I don't think I'm good enough. I don't think I'm worthy of your love. But then when I did reveal myself more deeply, you loved and accepted and affirmed who I was. And there was just a confirmation of my identity, and it was so much more deep. Because from the very beginning, man wasn't meant to be alone. We were meant for communion. We were meant for community, and that is really allowing ourselves to know and to be known. And when we see the other, when we see in our spouse true beauty, we're really taking on that deep kind of primordial role that God planted in our hearts for that level of intimacy and for community. So, and the whole idea too, when you think about vulnerability, is that God created us male and female, and we're two very different creatures of God. And in getting to know you, I have come to know part of God,
That's right.
that I cannot see from my own natural disposition. But getting to know you, I'm seeing the more fullness of who God is and his amazing authorship, his amazing creativity, and his love. I don't know if that makes sense. Does it?
You know what? There was, and that we watched that one video, that Humanum video.
Humanum Project.
And this person from another country, I forget what country they were from, had the most beautiful, most beautiful saying about how God is revealed through the complementarity of man and woman. In that he said, "My wife, through our marriage, my wife takes on my masculine qualities, like learns my masculine qualities, but she manifests them in a feminine way." Like, for example, like the masculine qualities of like being aggressive or, whatever. But I learned that from you through our marriage, but then I can manifest that in a feminine way.
Right.
And like you can learn from me, like the nurturing, like the natural feminine qualities of being like nurturing, like with a baby, a newborn. But you manifest that in a masculine way, that feminine quality, masculine way. You think about it, it's like, yeah, of course, because Mike has learned to be more nurturing, but is he nurturing the way I am? No, of course not. I have learned to be more assertive, more whatever. I can't think of other masculine qualities, but in my own way, I've learned that from you, but I manifest it in a feminine way. And it's really, that is God.
Right. It's the exchange, and that is new. It's all of that is beauty, and all of that's known, and you get to know God, God the Father's love through that.
Because God is neither masculine nor feminine; He is all of.
That's right. That's right. He's bigger than all of that.
He's bigger than all of that, and so it's just such a beautiful way that can only happen through sharing and vulnerability and being willing to learn and letting down your pride.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So that goes to some cautions as far as if you are engaged or you are dating, or you are just making friends,
Right.
And Mike always tells our daughters this, like when they're dating, is to really guard their hearts, to really guard your heart, because really trust is earned through experience.
That's right.
And you just can't cast your pearls before swine, so to speak.
That's right.
Like, without earning someone's trust, you shouldn't reveal your whole heart to them, reveal your whole self to them.
That's right.
Because you're better than that. Because you're the garden of your heart, for man and woman, anyone, really needs to be opened gate by gate. It can't just be... Right. You can't just let somebody just run on
storm through the castle. Because I think that our world tends to think, and I think it's a challenge of our day, kind of this idea that we can be engaged intimately with hundreds of people or something like that. That's not true. You can't reveal the deepest part of you to a mass of people. So you have to be very slow and cautious. We don't need to put everything about our intimate details of our lives on Facebook.
Or what I feel like people do a lot of times is they just emote, everything that it's like their journal.
Right.
And it's like, that is just so unhealthy. Yeah. It's just like, you know what? If it's your journal, hey, write it down, keep it under lock and key.
Privacy.
Keep it private. We don't need to know everything you feel about every personal situation in your life. because it's just not appropriate.
It's not healthy for you.
And it's not healthy for you because
you are beautiful, and
those feelings need to be respected.
Your inmost thoughts
right.
ought to be protected. And too many times there are people in our modern day that just throw that out, do throw their pearl before swine, throwing their things that they hold. And not that you don't stand up for our Catholic values or things like that nature, but you throw your pearls before swine when you don't have a confidence and trust in that person. And so there's that's a big caution. And it's almost like the kind of, would you call it the emotional, what'd you say?
Emotional chastity?
Well, no, yeah, I guess the emotional emote, through Facebook. It's kind of just like a recklessness about that, that really does challenge us. But you mentioned emotional chastity. And I guess that kind of goes along with very much the same theme, but the idea that we aren't meant to have deep, intimate relationships with everybody. So if you are married, engaged, so forth, you really shouldn't have deep, intimate relationships with members of the opposite sex.
Oh, yeah.
Because again, just as a forewarning, it's like when you're single, when you're just kind of dating around, you might have some really close guy friends, or members of the opposite sex, right?
For sure.
And not that you won't still have friendship after marriage, but you have to recognize that there is emotional chastity while you're dating somebody, that again, you slowly reveal yourself, and that your emotional intimacy or your vulnerability and your physical intimacy have to kind of go in step with the commitment and where you're at. And if your commitment is that we're just dating, you need to guard your heart to that and keep emotionally chaste. But then when you're in a marriage, you really shouldn't be looking at a member of the opposite sex that you're revealing the intimate life that you have, because it's essentially putting you, in my opinion at least, I mean, people might disagree, but I believe it puts you in a near occasion of sin. Not because
For sure it puts you in a near occasion of sin, of course.
Not because you're necessarily going to go and sleep with this person and have an affair, but you're opening a door. You're opening an opportunity where you might be sharing something that you haven't shared with your spouse yet, and that is a question that you need, and we'll get to that later, but that's a question you need to look.
Won't.
Oh, we won't? Okay, that's right, we didn't bring that down. But the idea that if you're sharing things and you're married, you're sharing intimate things with a member of the opposite sex who isn't your spouse, you need to ask, why am I not willing to share that with my spouse?
That is extremely dangerous.
Right.
Like that is really the first step. I mean, I've told my kids this. It's like people don't go from, we're just walking along here being friends to now we're sleeping together. Like there's a lot for good Catholic kids who want to do the right thing. There's a lot of steps. All it takes, getting to mortal sin is a series of small steps. And each one seems really easy and not a big deal. And it's not a big deal and not a big deal. And then before you know it, you're in near occasion of mortal sin, or you are in mortal sin. And I really feel like that relationships with opposite sex friends is, I mean, and we both have a lot of friends, who are of both sexes, just because we were friends with a large group of people before we got married, and we are fortunate enough to still be friends with a lot of those people, and they're a blessing to us. But they're not friendships that I have apart from Mike.
Right.
With other men.
Right.
Men who I love like my brothers. But I've been able to love them like a brother because I've been chaste.
Right.
With
Emotionally.
them, emotionally chaste with, what I would share with them, or how much time I would spend with them, or even the conversations that I would have, or whatever. I've just been always very, very aware of that. And keeping that just friendship,
right?
And that if we want to talk about something serious, when we talk about something serious, we talk about it as couples,
right?
Not one-on-one,
right? And again, in the workplace, there's going to be even more challenges. Oftentimes, you might be spending more time at work than you are at home. So,
well, you certainly do.
I know, but it's like,
other than sleeping,
right? But then it's like when you, much more time awake, right? But then when you think about that, those relationships, they're good, they're healthy, they're appropriate, but there needs to be boundaries. There needs to be a sense that there's an appropriateness, and no, we shouldn't cross those lines.
Right.
Which I think is really wonderful. All right, so that's some of the cautions or safeguards to just be aware of as we look at vulnerability. But before we go even further, I think we mentioned this before, but I think there's ways that we need to overcome some of the main challenges to intimacy. And I think the first one is that, and I'm going to say this for men, vulnerability is often viewed as a weakness. And that's true for both members of both sexes here.
For a man to say, I was hurt when you said that to me.
I mean, because the weakness is bad, evil, wrong, cast it out. Big boys don't cry, all of that junk, right? And that's a serious obstacle to, even if we like, oh, that's silly. Of course, I can share things with my wife. Can you really? Are you willing to? Or do you like the image that your spouse has of you as a guy, as a man, as the husband? Do you prize your impression and image that she might have more than an honest look at who you are?
Mm-hmm. And are you trying to portray a facade? And because your wife, men want to be admired.
That's right.
Or respected.
Mm-hmm.
And are you afraid to be like, you know what? I'm not the man that my wife thinks I am.
That's right.
And you know what? If you reveal that to her, I bet you she'll love you anyway.
I know. Well, and if you look at it from a male-female difference, and again, this isn't 100%, but I think men in general, we've talked about this before, want respect, as you said, and women want safety, right?
Yeah.
And those are two deep needs that each of us have, and being vulnerable challenges us in both of those ways because it makes a woman feel a little unsafe. Mm-hmm. By revealing. I mean, in some ways, you may have
What if he stomps all over my feelings when I share them? What if he ignores me?
You are more, as a woman, are more in touch with your feelings than a typical man would be. Mm-hmm. And so you might have a home court advantage, kind of, in that regard. But it also challenges you. And again, these are both recognizing there is a reality of risk. When we're talking about vulnerability, it is risk. And let's not sugarcoat it. It is risk. You're stepping out, and there's the possibility of rejection and so forth.
And I just want to give an example of risk to kind of get this, because I was thinking about this before when you were talking. Like when I say, when we were first married, this doesn't happen as much now, but if I say, you know what, I was really hurt when you talked about my cooking, in that way.
I love your cooking.
I know. That's what I said at the beginning of our marriage.
Okay.
But if I say I was really hurt when you made that comment at the dinner table in front of our friends,
right,
about our cooking or my cooking or whatever, a first reaction from a husband might be, "Oh, I didn't mean that." Kind of like you're accusing me,
defending myself.
Exactly. There's a defense mechanism that can kind of kick in,
right?
And I just want to caution husbands, wives, when your spouse says, I was hurt when this happened, and you feel yourself getting defensive, that right there is when the fight, that's the seeds of the fight, right then.
That's so
because
true.
Your spouse just revealed themselves to you. And what are you going to do with that? What do you do with that? And being defensive and saying, oh, I didn't mean to do that, which is very different from, I am so sorry, I didn't mean to do that, but how dare you accuse me of hurting you and blah, 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 blah. Then you've just taken their feelings and stomped all over them.
That's right.
And that's absolutely happened to us. So don't feel bad if that happens to you, but be aware of it.
And I think that I think men in general, that's what we want to do because, again, not that both, again, I speak in generalities and recognize that both of us, as men and women, but Alicia
Mike has a strong feminine side.
Yeah, that's right. You can tell my girlish figure. But the idea that men want to, again, present that image, and they also have a very strict sense, oftentimes, of justice.
Right, and they want to fix things.
Yeah, and so they look at the problem.
You shouldn't have felt that way because I love your cooking,
right,
and I just want it to be better.
Right, and I said, well, you never tell me you love me. Well, I told you when we were married. I'll tell you when it changes, or something like that. And, that idea that men are imperiable. What's that word?
I don't know what you're trying to say.
It doesn't matter.
Impermeable?
Whatever the word is.
Imperial? I don't know. There's a lot of M words. I'm not trying to help you out here.
Yeah, forget it. I'm just moving on.
We need a thesaurus.
Yeah. So, but impenetrable.
Okay, there you go.
And that we can't be breached. That we don't have weaknesses. And so when you point out something, even if you're simply sharing that you were hurt, it automatically becomes, oh, you're pointing out weakness in me, which I do not like.
Yeah, I'm pointing out your weakness that you were thoughtless,
right?
Or that you were
right, and you're not doing it to attack me.
Exactly.
You're doing it to reveal your
Exactly.
heart and what's going on in your life. And I'm trying to both protect myself and my character and good name or whatever, and a sense of justice, and then also saying, oh, while I'm at it, let me fix you too, because you wouldn't, if you thought more like me, like a man, you wouldn't have been hurt by that. You would have known that I was just a joke, and nobody else thought it was a problem,
right?
And that obviously you that's the destroyer
Exactly.
of vulnerability.
And see, we know these things because
we have practiced this.
we have practiced this.
We got really good at that for a while.
Yes,
but we've gotten a lot better.
Oh,
honestly.
yeah. But I think that the key, and really this is, from women too, because especially if your husband comes to you and says, I was really hurt, when you did this. I think women can take that as an attack on, I'm not being compassionate, I'm doing this,
right.
Whatever. And sometimes too, we can beat ourselves up.
That's right.
That we're so horrible and blah, blah, and that is also a lie.
That's right.
That's not true. You can say, it's okay to say, I failed at loving you. I apologize.
Right.
That's okay.
Right. And it can go, and again, I'm sorry, please, I'm speaking a lot in generalities of male, female, but it could happen on either masculine and feminine. But like a woman might take it in and it might become more internal, and she might be brooding, and she might, and again, it could be the same for a guy, but the guy might try to defend himself externally and respond to that right away. Where if a guy shares something, the wife may just be playing that tape over in her head, like, I have failed him, and and taking that on, which then comes out sideways later, as opposed to respecting what's being shared, and it's not being shared as an attack. Right. And I remember, I think I shared this with you, Ted Suri, who's works now at the Augusta Institute, but we were alums, or we were at Franciscan together. Had this one time where he said something just kind of short to his wife, and was just kind of snippy at something, and her response was, "I'm sure you didn't mean it that way," or had something, and he was like completely disarmed because she was so loving, and it
made him realize, I don't know how I'm sounding.
Right, and he says, "I can't believe I was so whatever insensitive." Yes, and I've always been impressed by that. And then he went on to say, well, he says, but our marriage isn't, that was the one bright shining moment. Or no, he's kind of got a wonderful marriage. I don't mean that as a negative, but he made some kind of funny joke. But when we look at our spouse, are we both in how we share and how we receive that message? Are we allowing them to say, we're loving you, we accept you, and we're building an environment of trust that you can be, comfortable sharing on
and
that
I think
level.
that both men and women, husbands and wives, need to have your eyes open to when your spouse says something. It's almost like you should have a radar to see, okay, they're revealing themselves right now.
That's right.
They are being vulnerable right now. This is a moment. They're revealing themselves. I'm feeling myself get defensive. Okay, just shut up. Don't talk.
Right.
And just concentrate on the other person.
Right.
Put yourself in their shoes. And that's something that we really worked a lot on.
Right.
And that we are able to do now. Because I think when you know each other, as through marriage, or the longer you're married, the longer you know each other, it's easier to put myself in your shoes.
Right.
Because I kind of know your shoes better.
That's right.
I know what your feet would look like. But I think that when you're able to recognize when your spouse is being vulnerable with you and stopping yourself and respect that,
Right.
and really try to see things from their perspective,
That's right.
it can really go a long way to strengthening your relationship.
And that radar of saying, this is a crucial conversation. This is a crucial moment where I need to stop whatever I'm thinking about and zero in on her or on him.
Yeah, I think that it's because I think that it's more often that women will say, I was hurt by this than men. I think it's really hard. I think men will say, I was hurt by this, but they don't use those words. They say it in another way.
They do. And I think that is, again, I'm making a generality here, but just as you said, I think there are women who are like, I want him to be more vulnerable, but recognize that men and women are different. Again, I really do. I mean, you have a home court advantage. You are much more in tune with your emotions and what's going on than I do. I can't, it's oftentimes people talk about women's intuition, that they can just sense things and know it.
Yeah,
but from an emotional standpoint, you actually have an ability to understand your emotions, your internal life much better than men do. We don't always understand it and or can articulate it.
Like I feel like sometimes with men, a man being vulnerable, for example, would be, you get into a fight and he's really mad and upset and he comes home with flowers.
Right.
Is he saying, I'm sorry, I was wrong? Is he actually physically saying those words? No. But that action is an action of vulnerability.
That's right.
And I think if you want him to say those words, you need to accept that first act.
That's right.
You need to respond in a way that's affirming and saying, I got you. So then the next door will open.
That's right.
But if you reject that, if you say, I really don't want flowers. What I really want you to do is to talk to me. Yeah, that's not going to work, sweetie. That's bad. No. You accept the flowers. You say, you know what? I think you're having maybe... I'm sorry too, or whatever. Yeah. And then you can have that conversation. But I think that any action or any move towards, even if it's not words, even if the man is acting, even if your husband is acting, that needs to be affirmed. And then, you'll get to the conversation.
It's baby steps, because I think many women desire greater emotional intimacy with their husband, and but you can't force it, you can't demand it, and you can't tell them how to do it per se. I mean, you can encourage it,
you can model it,
but by modeling it and not overwhelming them, and also not picking on them or nagging them into it.
Why don't you ever talk to me?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's just like, it doesn't help. But creating that environment of trust, that climate of we have regular communication, and also recognizing where they're coming from. Like you said, I mean, they do. Men can and need to share verbally what's going on in their heart and their mind, because you can't guess at it. But again, it's funny because oftentimes men are looking at a woman and saying, I don't know what you're thinking. I don't know what's going on there. And for a woman, she has a million things going on in her mind at that very moment, and she doesn't have even to
Sometimes it's hard to say it.
Right. But for a guy, there might be nothing going on. And the woman's like, no, tell me what you're thinking. Absolutely nothing.
But sometimes there's hurt going on there, but they don't know how to say it, because how do you put that into words?
Is that there is sometimes we're not as complex oftentimes in our process, but it's also not as easily understood even by ourselves.
Right. And I think that some of the reasons that happens is, family upbringing.
Yeah,
I think that when you have a family that values openness and that values communication.
Right, honest communication.
Communication, that's a big help when you've seen it modeled by your parents, and you've seen your parents talking and arguing and making up, and you can see, oh, okay, they're being open. It's like layers of an onion. They're intimate things that happen in our childhood that we observe within our family.
Right.
That it's nothing you can necessarily put your finger on.
But it's forming us.
But it's forming you. It's forming you. So we have two people coming together as husband and wife from two different families, and sometimes that family upbringing really does make a difference or whatever. And some may only have seen arguing and abuse in their homes.
That's right.
When there was disagreement, when there was vulnerability, they saw vulnerability met with abuse.
That's right.
Basically.
And it could be verbal or otherwise. That's a reality.
Being ignored.
And recognizing that, if it's the 50% divorce rate or over 40% of people have grown up in divorced households.
Right.
And not the only reason, but many reasons for divorce are that lack of intimacy, that lack of good communication and healthy relationships.
Right.
Okay.
So I think we need to probably wrap it up. I think that we covered a lot of this things. But you want to give him the questions?
Yeah. So, again, the whole goal here is that you're going to have a faithful and fruitful marriage based upon intimacy, based upon sharing, being transparent, naked without shame in your heart and in your unity, because that's where true freedom is. Was the World Meeting of Families that was taking the quote of St. Irenaeus, that the glory of God is man fully alive. And, if you look at your marriage and say, the glory of God is your marriage fully alive.
That's so true.
And that's what we want. That's what we
Even
desire.
more so.
And that's what our world needs to see. And it's nice to talk, and it is important to talk about, marriage between a man and woman, about being faithful and, being chaste and all of that. But if you're not going deeper and really investing intentional time in getting to know your spouse and getting to know yourself and revealing yourself to your spouse, you're really not growing in your sacramental union, of intimacy in your marriage. So here are some questions that you should maybe consider. I'll just do one thing here. Don't let fear hold you back. Because in the Gospel of John, perfect love casts out fear. One, you're in a marriage, and you've made a lifelong commitment to this person, and with God's help, you need to get to that place. So if you're afraid of sharing, just go there and step out in small ways, maybe at first, but ultimately you need to get there. So here are some questions that you might want to consider as a couple here. Are you afraid of sharing your weakness, your failings, maybe even your past, that your spouse may not like or may be uncomfortable for you? Is there shame or pride that's holding you back from bringing up a very difficult topic or your true feelings?
And then do you feel a false sense of security by not revealing your heart? So I think when a lot of times keeping up those walls towards our spouse, and we're kind of being like, oh, I got it all together. Nope, I'm good. That's really a false sense of security.
Right.
And is that something that you are doing by not revealing your heart?
And do you fear that your spouse will leave you or reject you or betray you if they know how you really feel or who your true self is? So
you say, I'm feeling really anxious. I'm feeling really depressed.
Right.
Because they can probably already pick up on that.
That's right.
But for you to say it brings it out into the light.
Amen.
And
even the small little things, like I screwed up balancing the checkbook. Instead of hiding that, reveal yourself. Be honest.
I failed at my job.
That's right.
I made one of my kids cry today because I screamed at them so badly.
Right, whatever it might be, that's true. Just
all of this has happened.
That's right, and this is the whole point. Just go there with your spouse. Challenge each other. Go out on a date night. Talk about that. Are there areas that we haven't shared with our spouse yet? And let's take some baby steps forward in deepening our intimacy. I hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. If you have, if you could take 30 seconds, maybe a minute, to go to iTunes and rate the podcast and maybe put a review down. If you have any questions or comments or enjoy the podcast, we love hearing from you at messyparenting.org. You can send us a message there. You can also share it on Facebook. We really appreciate it if you actually post this to your, if it was interesting to you. Post it to your Facebook, because this is our 53rd or 54th episode, and we'd love to get this out to a large audience. So until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.